Hello and welcome to this short lecture video covering high-low analysis in Excel. And so if you look up on Canvas, you'll see this file called Additional CVP and Regression Problem. And go ahead and download that, and then we're going to take a look at this solution, Additional Excel Problem Solution, VE and Regression.xlsx, okay? So if you come over here, let's look back over here, you can see here's all the data. And so again, we have our month, and then we have our units sold, and then we have the total cost like this, all right? And so we're going to use high-low. In an earlier lecture video, we talked about regression, which is a little bit more in-depth. And so this one, we're going to use high-low, okay, to calculate out our variable cost and our fixed cost from this mixed cost like this, okay? So if you look over here, this is what we want to get to. We want to get to the high level of activity and then the low level of activity. So I'm going to come over here. Now I'm gonna redo this down here, okay? So I'm just gonna redo it on the solution file. So I'll say high activity, low activity, and I'll say cost with high, cost with low, VC per unit, and I'll say fixed cost, okay? And so what we can do, to get the high, we're just gonna use a function in Excel called max. I'll say equals max. And so what I want to do is find the high level of activity. So it's the high from here. Okay? And then that's 170. And then to find the low, I just come here and go equals min, the minimum level of units, right? Like that. That's min. And then to get the cost associated with the high level of activity, I need to use a VLOOKUP function. So I'm going to go VLOOKUP. Okay, what do I want to look up? I want to look at the high. Where do I want to look it up? I want to look it up here, like this, in my table. And then which column? 2. And then I want it to be an exact match. So I'll say false. Okay, and that gives me my 143,910. And then I can come over here, format it as currency, like that. And then I'll say my cost with my high-low, and I'll use another VLOOKUP, like that. Okay. And what do I want to look up? 130. Where do I want to look it up? In the table right there. There's my lookup table, my table array. And I want to look in the second column because that contains the cost. And then I do want it to be an exact match, so I'll say false. And that gives me my 116. And then again, I'll come over here. Oop, edit undo. Hit the undo button. I want it to be currency, okay? And so, to get my variable cost per unit, I'm going to do a formula where I'm going to take my rise over my run. So I'm going to take my cost difference divided by my difference in activity rate. Okay, that gives me my 673. And then to get my fixed cost per unit, and again I'll come up here and just give that the currency. And then to get my fixed cost per unit, I'll come over here and I'm going to choose either my total cost for my high or my low. It doesn't really make a difference. And so in this case I'll say I'll choose that one. And I'll say minus, and then I have to calculate out my total variable cost. So I chose the cost at the high, and so I'll say minus my 170 times my 673, and then that gives me my fixed cost. Okay? Now, in a prior lecture video, we went over how to do regression right over here, and then you can see when I say which one is better, I kind of make a comment right here where I say the regression approach is going to be a better approach, because you can see when we did the high-low, we only chose 2 data points, the high and then the low, versus regression would use all these data points to forecast the variable cost per unit and then to get the fixed cost. And you can see it's a little bit different here, 676 versus 673, but it's not that different because mainly we only have a few data points every year. If we had 100,000 data points, I would imagine regression would give pretty different answers than high-low. And also to keep in mind, the other problem with high-low is that it only uses well, first of all, it only uses 2 data points. And then second, it uses the high and the low, which are by definition outliers. So you're using outliers to forecast an average variable cost per unit, which when you sit down and really think about it, that doesn't make very much sense. Regression is a much better approach. Okay, so this concludes the lecture video on high-low. Thank you.